Thank you, Richard Herman, Larry Abel, Terry McDonald. Now it's time for you in the audience to form your own questions. Remember that anybody can participate in drafting a question, but only members can ask them. You have been listening to Terry McDonald, Richard Herman, and Larry Abel discuss affordable housing at the City Club of Eugene on June 7th. Members will now pose their questions to the panelists.
This question is addressed to anyone who wishes to respond. Are there programs that you have presently on the drawing board or in planning that are receiving opposition from the community? And if so, what are your best arguments to convince them that public housing is in the public interest, in their interest? Thank you.
Well, it's Terry McDonald. We did last year have some opposition from the Northeast neighbors, and specifically around the Bascom Village project on the County Farm Road. And the part that was very healthy about that process is that we tried to go through a series of public meetings with the neighbors and with the community group and with the school district and so forth, so that they were public, or they are actually sponsored by the City of Eugene Planning and Development Department. I think Stephanie's back there. And with the intent that we would try and answer as many of the questions as we possibly could to try and develop with the neighborhood the best possible project possible, and I believe we did as good a job as we possibly could have. And I think, Larry, you're involved in that process also.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Richard, and I would also, we just finished a project, Willackenzie Crossing, out in the Harlow Neighborhood Association, and I think it really is critical working with neighbors and reaching out to as many people as you can, and the City of Eugene itself cooperates in that process. But we spent a lot of time working in that case with the Grange Hall as well as the Neighborhood Association. And I'm really pleased to say in terms of that particular neighborhood that when we had our grand opening for Willackenzie Crossing, the president of the neighborhood association actually invited her Metro and the residents into the community. So that was a really positive experience.
Susan Conley, City Club member, thank you so much for coming. We were wondering at our table, we have all heard from time to time that people come to Eugene for the social services. So our question is, are there any studies that you know of that prove or disprove that old adage of if you build it, they will come?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Terry McDonald. And I have heard that comment many times, and I've actually heard it from every town that I work in around the United States. So when I was in Sacramento a couple of weeks ago working on the, there's a public dumping work group in California, and I was dealing with the folks from 5 communities throughout Northern California. They all said the same thing, which is, you know, we have a feeling that we're just drawing all the homeless to us. Now, in terms of statistics, yes, when we take the statistics of who the homeless are that we deal with, and we do that for everyone that we deal with in our various program areas, what we find is that 80% of the people that we deal with in those shelter programs, that's at First Place or Lind Home Center in 99, or in the Veterans Program and so on, are residents of the Eugene, Springfield, or Lane County, and that's where they are from. 20% tend to be from people from coming other places and moving through. Or else these are people returning back to their homes. So we do not find that the if we make it, they will come syndrome is really there. And we find this, by the way, replicated as in other communities, be it Santa Barbara or Austin, Texas, or Reading, Pennsylvania, that we don't find that people import homeless. And the reason is very simple. People that are homeless are just like you and I. We're looking for an opportunity not to just look for whatever is the next free lunch. What you're looking for is a life situation where you can get on with your life and be independent and, you know, take some pride in yourself and move on. The vast majority of people look for that. And what you do is it's wherever you can find the best opportunity for jobs and employment and stability. So that's why people move around, but that's why they're also resident.
I'm Robin Fletcher, City Club member, and my table was interested. We heard about programs for seniors, programs for families, programs for the disabled. What, if anything, is there for someone who isn't in one of those groups, like say someone from 50 to 65 who's in that gap, who's come across hard times without being disabled, maybe is single, maybe doesn't have any of the usual markers.
This is Larry. Well, I think that actually most of our housing developments would relate to those people. We talked about workforce housing and that we are building and have built. HACS's public housing, Section 8 programs do house people that you described, as well as people who are disabled and are elderly, and there's just not enough resources around to take care of everybody, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think this is Richard. I think that people living in our communities just represent the total community. So yes, we have people with disabilities, and yes, we have seniors, but as Larry said, in terms of most people, they're working, just trying to make enough to get by, and we want to work with those people in many cases to get them into career ladders and with employers who have scholarship programs and so on. The other thing I would say is that in terms of seniors, and you mentioned the 50 to 60-year group, there's many people that are seniors who really aren't going to retire. They're going to be continuing to stay in the workforce, given what's happening with Social Security and other things. So that's going to be, I think, a growing need area.
Joe Von Hippel, City Club member. Thank you all for coming and for spending your lives helping the needy. We really need it. My question has to do with Bascom Village, actually, because I know some of the people that live in that neighborhood, and I know some of their problems that they were having. And one of the problems is that there's no transportation, that the bus doesn't go that far, and they have to have a place to shop, and Market of Choice is a long way away, and so is Costco for a person who's walking. So I was wondering whether you make some effort to, when you're building affordable housing, to build it in places where there is transportation and there is shopping.
Well, it's Chair McDonald, and I would be remiss if I didn't say Ruth Demler is out there with a sign-up sheet if you want to take a look at some of the affordable housing in our community. She's trying to set up a time when we can get out and take a look at it. But in answer to your question, one of the things that we know is that the Northeast Eugene is one of the fastest growing parts of Eugene. If you think about the number of housing units that are being developed and are on the slate out there, one of the things that we know is that we need to have the conversations with LTD and the bus service to see if we can do a more robust method of serving that area. We also know that most of the people that live on our affordable housing have vehicles. That's one of the reasons why we make sure that there's sufficient parking for them. And so the last part on that is that often, especially with St. Paul projects and with the Housing Authority and Metro, we try and make sure that we have the ability to get people around by using our own vans and delivery. So we actually have service vans available with these projects so that we can actually do some of that, not on a daily basis, but on a weekly basis to make sure people get out. So the whole point on this is that we recognize fully that we want to have people where the jobs are, but where also the growth is going to be, and this is one of the areas that's fastest growing for Lane County. And if you think about the new jobs being created, if you think about the VA clinic that's coming there, the redesign and the redevelopment of the I-1 zone that we're seeing going on right now, I think this is going to be a job growth area for Northeast Eugene. And in that case, we're going to need to have people working out there that can have affordable housing. So it's an integrated approach.
Thank you.
This is Richard. I'd also just like to compliment LTD because we do, in the early stages of planning developments, talk to LTD and about the future needs. And so there is long-range planning going on with that. And the more ridership they have to serve, the more incentive they have.
Thank you. Sandra Bishop, City Club member. We had a guest at our table that had a question and would appreciate hearing from each of you. The original question is citing or zoning for affordable housing a serious issue in Eugene due to public opposition? You've talked a little bit about that before, but would you also talk about whether or not the zoning is adequate in Eugene and in Springfield? And if you have a different experience dealing with planning and zoning in Eugene as opposed to Springfield? would you talk about both of them? And if all of you would address it, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Well, I feel that the job that the city of Springfield and Eugene both do is very appropriate. In fact, the city of Eugene has done through their land bank program all of that work long in advance of communities being built. So and the other thing I would say is that there's been a lot of dispersal of housing throughout communities, so it's not in any one particular area. But the communities that are built do meet the zoning requirements, and from my perspective, the system works well.
Larry?
I would echo what Richard said. I don't think HACSA has any issues or has had any since I've been there in terms of zoning. And I agree, the city of Eugene and the city of Springfield have done a good job with that.
I'm Terry McDonald. The cities of Eugene and Springfield have no preclusion in the zoning code that would prevent us from developing housing, affordable housing in any place out there that you would develop the same market housing. So there's no discrimination, no preclusion. However, there's also a density bonus. So if you're developing affordable housing on the same zoned property, because you're developing affordable housing, you actually can have more units per acre. So actually, there's some encouragement for affordable housing.
Judy Sawyer, a City Club member. Our table would like to know whether there's any legislation at all afoot to fund at the state level or the federal level to fund affordable housing or any of the programs that you've discussed.
This is Larry. At the federal level, there's been pending legislation probably for 8 years in terms of improving the regulations so that we can better and more cost-effectively serve our residents. On the state level, there's an interesting bill right now that has to do with discrimination of Section 8 applicants. And this is Speaker Kotek's bill, and basically it says that landlords cannot discriminate against Section 8 applicants simply because they're Section 8 applicants. They can do that right now. They put ads in newspapers that say no Section 8 people. If this bill passes, they will have to take the applications. They can not house them for other reasons, criminal background, credit, and that kind of thing. So this one, the speaker has been working on for several years. There's a really group of landlords, housing authorities, legal aid have been working on it together, and at this point, the bill is scheduled to be voted on.
Betty Hosokawa, City Club member. Several people at our table were interested in a peripheral issue and would be interested in your suggestions or comments. They were wondering, what is the most helpful or appropriate way to deal with people on street corners who are asking for money or donations?
That was mine, Terry McDonald. And that's a question that often comes up. First of all, one of the good things about our community is that despite you may not have the dietary balance that you would like to have, the opportunity to have food in this community is actually very robust. To the degree to which the service providers do provide the housing opportunities in that homeless ladder, we do pretty well. And in terms of access centers to actually serving homeless individuals out there, I think we do pretty well also, and there's really basic three providers on that. It's the Mission, St. Vincent de Paul Catholic Community Services, and they all provide in one form or another that first place or that access into getting other services for the homeless that are out there. And so my encouragement for anybody that's on a corner crusader, we call a person that's homeless on the corner, is that first of all you should acknowledge and make eye contact. These are human beings, they are brothers and sisters, and for whatever reason, acknowledging them as a human being is a healthy thing to do, and so I think that's always a good thing to do. It doesn't mean you have to give them anything, But if you do want to say something is, you should avail yourself of the services that we have available, because they're actually quite robust, and I know that these people care.
This is Richard. I've seen before where people have given out cards with, the locations of the places that they can go for service, the dining room at Food for Lane County. And so making a direct referral in that way, and maybe we ought to print up some cards that everyone could have to do that.
Otto Patisha, City Club member. All three of you mentioned the major ingredients that need to support people to go to affordable housing. But you left off the fourth one. You said food, clothing, housing, and I believe transportation. And I was glad to hear somebody bring up the issue of transportation, but I'm not satisfied with your answers. I think transportation is a major ingredient, and I believe site selection is actually what drives design. It isn't the cute little buildings you build. It's how those buildings relate to the site. And I think that's also a way to deal with the neighborhood organizations. So I'd like to hear a better answer than people have their own transportation, or, yeah, we'll talk LTD into coming by our place. I think it starts at the beginning, which is finding a site that's well-served, even if it has existing buildings on it. So I'd like to have you sort of reevaluate your answers.
Well, thank you for the thank you for the observation and question. This is Richard. The Glenwood Project, Glenwood Place that we're doing in Springfield, 150 units, is in the planning stages now. This is something we're doing with HACSA. And that was a primary reason why we chose that location, was that it's on the main transportation line. It's on the rapid bus line, the MX line. And so we do believe that transportation is a critical component, and the closer we can build to those, the better.
That was a very timely question. This is Larry. Richard, me, and Betsy Hunter, our real estate development director, had a meeting this morning, and that was one of the things that prominently came up, so that the MX line will take people to the University of Oregon, LCC, downtown Eugene, and it was really a very major reason why we picked that site.
Dan Bryant, City Club member since '96. Larry, just a quick follow-up to the Speaker Kotek's bill, and I just wanted to double-check because I have heard that as high as 25% of Section 8 vouchers get returned because people can't find a place to rent. Does that sound about right, or?
This is Larry. Dan, it varies in different parts of the state. HACSA has not had that experience. We have a very small percentage of vouchers that does get returned. And I can't really speak to for other housing authorities, but I know that this has been one of the data gathering exercises that we've all gone through, and it is a problem in some areas, but not in Lane County.
Okay, thank you. The question actually that I rose came from a non-member. How do we get more public funding for affordable housing? And I think you answered that somewhat in speaking to the federal and state bills. But let me be more specific, because there's been a proposal from a major developer who wants to build a large student housing project of offering the city $1 million in return for a 10-year, MUPTI exclusion. So is that kind of trade-off worth it? Should we be making those kinds of deals with developers in order to get funding for these kinds of projects? And is $1 million going to make any difference? So, or any other ideas you have on where else we can get public funding? Yeah. I wanted to give you something easy to answer, because you've been...
Well, no, and let's try McDonald. What you're throwing is red meat. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and we have chosen not to use a straight line for the last 30 years in development of affordable housing. So the way we fund most of the affordable housing in the United States today is using tax credits. Those tax credits means that you're basically having about 20 to 25% of every deal peeled off the top for profits for people that want to make money off of their taxes. And it would be a lot simpler if we would just say, look, we're going to tax ourselves for the things we believe in rather than indirectly taxing ourselves for the things we believe in and redistributing the burden accordingly. Because when you're doing tax credits, you're rewarding one group, those that have high tax obligation, and letting them make a profit on that. And we're not rewarding you because obviously the tax dollars that would have come in aren't there to cover the things that most of us want. So you know what? Why don't we just be honest? We want the affordable housing. We ought to tax everybody for it. It should be on a progressive scale and be done with it. It's the way it used to be done in the old days.
Hi, my name is Marlene Nessery, and I'm a City Club member. And at our table, we're once again poking at the hard climate from the feds, and how do we influence them with some of the arguments that you've been presenting, that it's an economic development boon, and also at our table there was mention that it's a safety issue. If we can pass more jail beds to create a safer environment in our community, can we also create a safer environment in our community by finding a place for folks who are homeless? And how do we use those arguments to influence, especially the feds at this stage? Do you have any ideas? Thank you.
This is Larry. I've been racking my brain and doing everything I can to influence those people in Congress. And we also have national lobbyists and advocates groups that are very connected to Congress people and their staff. And you know, unfortunately, I would say it falls on deaf ears, and it's kind of what I said before. I think people in Congress really don't care about low-income people, to put it bluntly. And I think the best we can all do is do what we can do on a local level, and I think all of these organizations are doing that.
This is Richard. To go back to comments Terry was making in the beginning about what does this country stand for, and what kind of investments are we willing to make in people. You know, I grew up on public assistance, and you know, I didn't, in some cases, in a way, question that wasn't my right. I didn't have any question that it was my right to have 12 years of education. And I went on to college to California, and I paid it was like $80 a year for not tuition, because I had essentially a free education in California. And I bought my first house with no down payment, $100 in closing costs. I used the GI Bill. And so that's a form of subsidy that we made, an investment in people. And I made money over the years. I paid a lot of taxes. I'm doing the work I do now because I can afford to do it for what I've done in the past. And we're not doing that same thing now. And if you look at what we did after World War II, when those guys came back, what did we do? We got them into housing, and we got them into education. And I think that's something that everybody's got to take a step back and look and say, you know, this country is about investing in people, investing in our future, and that's what we need to do.
Hi, I'm Betsy Stephenson, and I am a member of the City Club. I have sort of a 3-point question, and maybe not a solution, but an idea. In all your wonderful talks, thank you, gentlemen, one group was not singled out, and it's the one that I personally am really trying to figure out, what in the heck are we going to do for the homeless students, over 2,000, probably 3,000 in Lane County, who are not connected with their families, not by their choice. They've either been abused or something, they've been kicked out. So they are actually registered in Bethel, Springfield, and Eugene schools and sleep under bridges. So I've met a 17-year-old girl who sells her body to get a room for she and her dad, who's a Vietnam vet who can't walk. I mean, we have got to think about the youth. Now, we hear from the federal programs there's a problem with education and there's a problem with health for kids getting too fat. Isn't there some way that we could work together, and every month when City Club news goes out, and we could get it on KLCC, I'm sure we could have, oh, here's an idea, write these ideas to Wyden, DeFazio, and Merkley. Because according to their offices, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, they say they really respond to written messages. They get 1 million emails. They get a lot of calls. Handwritten messages, wow, do they make a point. So if you guys could come up with some suggestions about how we could influence these people that I'm hearing you say in DC don't give a darn, and maybe we could start a campaign.
Yes.
So let me just take a quick whack at this, Terry McDonald. One of I've had this discussion with the members of the Springfield School District and Board, and they're concerned about this. I mean, we're all concerned about this issue of the non-emancipated youth that are still functional and still in school, but are in extremely precarious life situations associated with their housing. And the issue really is, what do you do when you're dealing with minors that are non-emancipated? And the issue is around emancipation, because if you're going to be a service provider and you're dealing with youth, it's a completely different set of rules. And so if you're going to deal with that minor population, finding exceptions or a way through that, where service providers could create the kind of Oxford House model, but not be put into the juvenile justice system, would be probably a good place to start.
This is Larry. I would just say, and I hate to be pessimistic about our people in Congress, and Senator Merkley and Wyden do really care. We've been told to email them, not to write letters, because they won't get opened sometimes. Senator Merkley does respond, and I think it's a really important issue that you raised, and we do need to figure out ways to deal with that.
Sandra Bishop, City Club member. Could you educate us a little bit about Section 8? Excuse me. The context here that I want to be asking this question is that in west side of Eugene, there are a lot of large houses. A lot of those houses are divided and have apartments in them. And that's the situation in the house that my husband and I own. We have a couple apartments. It was originally built as a quite a large house. It's got 3 floors, so it's divided into a couple apartments upstairs. So someone approached me who had a Section 8 voucher, and I didn't know anything about Section 8. She said, I want to move in, I love this apartment, da-da-da. Oh, by the way, this apartment doesn't fit the criteria for Section 8. And it had nothing to do with the actual apartment. It had to do with where the laundry facilities are. The washer dryer's in the basement, and the ceilings are too low, and it's steps. So can you talk a little bit about this? Even though some of us may want to honor something like Section 8, is there any way that the Section 8 people can be allowed to, can you waive some of the Section 8 rules for some of the people who don't need all of the accommodations that apparently the Section 8 has, or is it just ironclad rules that you have no room? And the person, and I have to tell you a little bit more detail, the person said to me, oh, don't worry about it. I'll just tell them that it's okay. And I said, excuse me, I'm not, as the landowner, I'm not willing to do that. So maybe Terry or
This is Larry. Well, we get a lot of reasons why apartments or houses will not work for Section 8 applicants. Usually it has to do with fair market value and the rent being too high. And facilities do have to pass housing quality standards. I've never heard that a washer and dryer in the basement is a problem. not heard of ceilings being too low. It may be, I'm not the expert on that, but I would suggest you call our taxes office, ask to speak to Jenny Costello, who's our Section 8 Division Director, and run those by her. It would be a shame if this person could actually rent your unit and isn't, and for those kinds of reasons.
I'm Marge Ramey, City Club member. I'm interested in the people. It's wonderful to hear about the housing and the transportation, all of that. But when you put a family into an apartment or a veteran into an apartment, what help do they get in making life work for them in a new setting? Would you answer some of that?
Well, great question. An equal part of our program is the resident services program, and I know that's true for other providers as well. And so we do everything from a collaboration with Food for Lane County, where we bring in food, cooperation with others for educational kinds of trainings that take place on site, and getting people connected to other community resources. So I need to keep that brief in terms of the time.
Terry McDonald, the same ditto, and we also have our vocational services office and the services associated with the larger St. Vincent de Paul family of services, including jobs and employment. In the last, 5 years, I think we've added 150 full-time jobs. So.
And this is Larry. Just quickly, HUD used to provide funding for resident services and housing authorities. They don't do that anymore.
Thank you, Terry McDonald, Richard Herman, and Larry Abel, for bringing clarity and vision to this conversation.